We're back with another episode of the Jaywalking Podcast. I'm your host, it's Jay. We're telling one story at a time while taking one step at a time. How you guys doing this evening or this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are in the world or wherever time it is? I just hope you're doing well, you are blessed, and that the fact that you're here and you're alive, and I'm glad you're listening to the podcast currently right now in the world. And today's episode, I want to talk about all about representation and how so important it is to have, you know, your own people and representation, and not just in anime, but in other different forms of media, whether it's movies, TV shows, hell, even, just like short stories. Representation is so important. And there's been times in my life in anime where, I always watch the anime, the classics, like the Naruto, the Dragon Ball Z, and just growing up in like the Toonami era where you had to wake up, late at night around 12 or 1 just to watch episodes and not miss a beat, because there'll be times where they'll like play, the last episode of like what happened last week and then play the new episode and let it air live. And it was just one of those things where you had to like wait each and every week for that. And even growing up, there was very few characters, in the anime space where, you felt represented. And I'm not just talking, just, being black, but I'm just talking about even just like, how big are you? How small are you? Different style of clothing you wear, et cetera, et cetera. Because representation is such a powerful thing. It reminded me of this TikTok, and I always go back to this when I think about representation. Excuse me. It was this little girl that was posted up, with her mom and stuff on TikTok, and she has like a birthmark where it like covers partially her face, and it looks like a burn mark, but it's not really like no, you know, texture that relates to that. It's just a birthmark. And she saw a doll, and it was Todoroki. For those who don't know, Todoroki is in My Hero Academia, and his quirk or the superpower he has is called hot and cold. Basically, half of his body he can heat up in extreme temperatures, basically like he can manipulate and control fire, and his other half of the body, can manipulate and control ice. So half and half, hot, cold. ha- Basically, he's an icy hot. First he's hot, then he's cold, or maybe he's both at the same time. But what's great about his character is in development of like just having a terrible father growing up, and just having to be only used as like a weapon or a showcase of two quirks, and being able to counterbalance each other. And for those who haven't seen My Hero Academia, I encourage you to watch it, because Todoroki's story and his father and just everything about that, bloodline is a great, subplot in My Hero Academia. But what made his character drawn the most with this, little girl, is because he has the same birthmark or scar in the same region like of his face. But if you haven't seen the show, this is a spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1. When he was growing up, he got, hot water thrown on his face because the mom at the time was just being used to just produce kids, and but just also just, just to make sure like her quirk can be transmitted to her son. And at some point she was so traumatized by, I guess, like the dad and like how he looked, and I guess Todoroki like looked a certain way to the mom, and the trauma response to her literally like made her throw hot water on him, and that's where he got that significant burn from. But it was pretty cool because she was like, he's just like me, and the internet went completely, nuts for this, but in a good way. For those anime fans, like, I don't know who did it, but then someone who was a fan drew her like in an anime cartoon, like meeting Todoroki, and it was such a cool moment where even the person who voice acted Todoroki, I think it was the Japanese version of Todoroki, like the voice actor, literally like sent a message to this little girl, because the internet was desperate to try to like make sure she knew who this person was, what it was about, and the anime community came together and just brought these two together. It was just such a wholesome moment, but it all came from just representation and how one character can literally show up how they are, whether it's through creative genius or just a coincidence, and all of a sudden we have a whole movement where now this little girl, whenever she grows up, is cemented in like anime fantasies of meeting the idol or the person who looks just like her, and hopefully she even gets a spot where she's in an anime story with this person and a spinoff in My Hero Academia. Who knows? But it's just crazy how the whole world came together and just brought this wholesome moment and made it into a much bigger thing in a good way. And that made me like one of those proud moments of being part of this community. And that was just a cool experience, I would say. But for me, I know for representation, there was a couple characters that come in mind. One, I know this is a cop out, but when I was watching Naruto growing up, like I did not necessarily see a lot of like black culture or like black people in the show. But it was so cool when Naruto Shippuden, like came around, and all of a sudden I discovered a whole village of black ninjas, and that was a pretty cool thing. Because while you're watching the show, you come to accept like, okay, like there's not going to be a lot of people that look like you, but they have like a particular characters that fit the build, like in a more physical sense. But I kid you not, when I heard of Killer B and I saw he was from the Hidden Cloud Village, which is so ironic when it comes to this show, but the Hidden Cloud is a bunch of just black individuals, a black culture. And that was pretty fucking cool for me when I seen that when I was growing up, because just to see like, oh my God, the world that I'm invested in and loving, the story of Naruto, and now I see my people being a part of the story and also continuing to be the part of the story, because one of the members is a Jinchuriki that's helping Naruto, and he's a black man helping pretty much the Americanized, Japanese, main character, because I say he's Americanized because he got blonde hair, but that's besides the point. It's just the fact of the matter is there was a black person helping out the main character, and there's a whole village of black people, which is the most insane thing growing up. And it was pretty cool because even I talked to my friends who was into the show, they were surprised. They were even like, "Oh snap, they got us in there." So it was just a cool connected moment where literally I'm in high school talking, with a couple guys that also into anime, and it was just a fun experience just to be able to relate to those guys and connect. One other character too that comes up for me is Choji. Now, Choji was a special character for me because he was like the only big fat guy in the group of the whole ninja world, but they showed off his powers and showed off his build is not necessarily a weakness. It showed him as a kind, loving person that, yes, makes fun of his size, but people who really cares about him is only just saying like, "Hey, bro, like don't eat too much or don't do that." But they never doubted his abilities. They only wanted to make sure he was loved and supported, and he was so interesting as a character because even during the show, and just even let's for instance go to the Sasuke retrieval arc. For those who haven't watched Naruto, basically this is one of the best arcs in the original Naruto where Sasuke has left the village, and this is where boys became men, and one of them boys was Choji, and he was the first one fighting, not only for his life but just to help with the mission. And it showed his powers off very like normally, like using like expansion jutsu and becoming a big fat ball and just kind of rolling around. But then it got to a place where he was using his size and using his jutsu to kind of to his advantage, but when it wasn't enough, he pulled out the most badass moment where he had like three pills that was from his clan. I can't pronounce their name right. I can't pronounce. I don't want to butcher their name, but it's basically there's their clan's secret technique where his clan, Shino, not Shino, Shikamaru's clan and Ino's clan have sacred jutsus that is only amongst them, and no one else can learn it besides the third Hokage because he learned everything about the village. But Choji and them have these special pills where it helped, with their metabolism, but also boosts like their physical attributes. And he went from fat to skinny. And when I seen that, for some odd reason, that made me thought of one or two things. Just looking back on it, one, like, do I need to take certain pills to be like that? Or two, how I'm looking at it now is like he is being empowered by who he is as a person, but he using what he has to kind of fight off this identity and fight off this person that's basically like shit talking him the whole time. And he beats him, granted with a high risk of like, dying, but showing that a character who's loving character and like big size was able to not only be skinny, and also be one of the most powerful characters at that moment in that time frame. And it was cool that out of all the characters, like in the show, he's the only big one. He's the kind-hearted one. Yet when it came to his friends, he was going to put everything on the line. And back then, that hit me so much from home because I was that big fat kid. I still consider myself a big kid, but now I have more muscle and obviously I'm much older. But back then I was more fat and I was always caring for other people and make sure everyone was good and yada yada yada. But just to see that character literally embodying that, it made me felt like connected. I'm like, okay, I'm Choji in my world right now, and it was such a great experience, and it shaped me in a way where I'm like, I can still be kind and I can still be a genuine person, regardless of my size and regardless of how I look. But if my family or friends are in danger or they need my help, I'm absolutely there as best as I can and best as I can do in that moment. And that literally just embodied my whole view of that. But it also shows up in like the culture of those representation and the nerd culture as well, because like I said, Killer Bee and the Kid and Cloud, like a whole village, being black, being literally translated into like our own culture where we can be like one village and just being together and helping each other, whether you're a black woman, a black man, and all these different things that comes with that. Is so important for that to continue to show up in the nerd culture, because nerd culture in itself has a mix of everyone in it and everyone's welcome, but to also welcome black nerds into that culture is such a great thing, because we could bring that swagger, that vibe, and we can bring a different flavor compared to everyone in that space. But that's also the space that's more accepting of us, at least far as like my recent memory and like interactions of conventions, because every time we go to convention, it's black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever you can think of is all in one place, and everyone's being represented, whether it's Yu Yu Hakusho, Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Black Clover, hell, what's like a Jujutsu Kaisen? Like, we have so many different representations of not only size, race and interest, because there are certain animes that's literally mainly meant for people who like soccer, mainly people that like basketball. Hell, it could be a hockey anime, far as I know, but it's so many different things that is blended into the anime culture, where a black nerd like myself and other nerds in the space can find something to connect with. It's just a pretty cool experience. And just to kind of transition from that, it expands not only just in anime, but just in media too, whether it's movies, TV shows, stories from books. Representation is important, dude. Like, think about like when Black Panther first dropped, you saw on every internet social media platform, everybody showed up in traditional African attire just to watch this movie, because it gave us a sense of royalty, it gave us a sense of power, it gave a moment to be connected with everyone. And Chadwick Boseman able to bring out that character of T'Challa, Prince T'Challa, mind you, literally just embodying like black royalty and just what it means to be who you are, and to show the struggles of like, there's one side where there's royalty, but then Killmonger also shows a deep psychological and literally a message of what things could have been like, if they didn't have the Wakanda support, and been with, the oppression and going through all the stuff that's happened in America. To this day, there's certain stuff in the first Black Panther is literally happening in our days, current situation right now. I don't want to get too much involved with it, with politics, but just know, your rights, and we know what is needed to be done for this country. But I kind of want to give some rest on that. So let me just give myself a moment. But yeah, that's literally like a representation of, again, like how even today's age is happening. And if you notice, like there was a small pause and kind of connected back. I had to call my wife called me, and again, she's also a person who is interested in anime, and we just had a small talk about like how representation was just important, because even in the media of like for Black women, in anime, and like the prowess of like just being empowered as well, also take strides and just and should be pressed into the media. And that's just a whole other thing. But just going back to the point of, again, like the first Black Panther, everyone was just hyped about it, and it brought so many people together, but it also opened other people's eyes of what potential struggles that happens, whether it's psychological or like literally plaster in your face of what the Black community and Black nerds go through. And the same thing happened in Black Panther 2, where, well, it's not Black Panther 2, it's called Black Panther Wakanda Forever, where literally you see Shuri go through all stages of grief and just dealing with, again, like being a independent, strong woman, Black woman, in Wakanda, and also dealing with her own trials and tribulations. And that subplot of just like, again, like what she goes through and like how she overcomes it, and just being who she is, and remember who you are, is such a powerful moment in media of, hey, this is what could be in America for not only just Black nerds, but just Black people in general. So I know that kind of took a different turn and a different shift, but it just goes to show you again, like how representation, whether it's Black, white, big, small, fat, you know, or overly skinny, and just all the other things that, you can think of, like it's so important, because everyone deserves to be seen, everyone belongs to something, but most importantly, we all belong to, what we call humanity and being human. That's such a powerful thing to know and recognize, not just in anime, but in media and just connecting with others, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I have for this episode. I know it kind of shifted in the middle of that, and it kind of changed up a little bit, but I want to keep everything in, because one, regardless of what, comes up during the podcast, this is real, authentic, and just interesting to post, especially when it's like a little bit late at night, where I'm kind of casual and not so like driven of like what I can think of and what I can say. It's more of just a real conversation with you guys. And so far with all the podcasts, it's been a real conversation. But just doing it in this format where it's like a little bit at night, it's a little bit chill, and just not everything is happening. Granted, it's the 4th of July as of this recording, but it's pretty chill right now, and then I like it. And it shows that, I'm just doing a podcast whenever, and just keeping it going and keep it pushing. But yeah, that's the end of the podcast, everyone. Thank you for listening through my rambles. Thank you for sticking with me. And I just appreciate you guys for just watching and listening to the podcast, because it truly makes, my representation of, who I am and what I do. And I hope I at least inspire one of you guys to achieve your goals or dreams, or even just like want you to at least motivate you to, do it, something that's out of your comfort zone, whether, it's something that's big or small. Just I hope, I inspire at least someone to do something for themselves. All right. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. Please take care of yourself. And most importantly, keep walking. Good night, everyone.